Tech Talk Tuesday. Hello, live from the project room in Nashville, Tennessee. All right, let's get some folks signed up on here and I'll share some information. Hey Chuck, you're first today. Good job. Get to see you guys on here. I love seeing these names pop up. John, Dee Dee, hey, Charlie. 155 times, right, Charlie? That's crazy, isn't it? Tech Talk Tuesday, Ricky Smith. Yeah, Rick, y'all look, Tech Talk, 155. That's a lot of Tech Talk, man. Hey, Ed. Hey, Junior. Scott, thank y'all for tuning in. I'm out here in the project room, out back at the Bryce Estate. Hello. Hey, Ben. Hey, John. I figured that once I get a few more little people on here, get it rolling, we'll do a tour of the man cave, and I'll pan around a little bit in the project room because I've been around this stuff every day for my whole life, so some of it seems mundane or normal to me or my family, but to some of you guys, it's pretty unusual, and I'd like to share that with you because one thing I learned is after all these years, can you imagine that how us that have been around for all these years, I'll be, let's see, what will I be? I'll be 68 in September, Labor Day, yeah. So after all these years doing this for the whole time, hey Cash, hey Junior, hey Charlie, thank you for saying loud and clear. I appreciate the sound check. Thank you. Hey Nick, I wanted to say that the only way we're going to advance our future as people and as humans is for us to share what we think we know and share our experiences to others. And that's my goal here for 3 years in a row now, every Tuesday at 6 o'clock Eastern. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nick, for saying how much you appreciate that. Jerry, Chad. All right, we got enough people in here to do a little shop tour. So I'm going to wiggle around with this little stand a little bit and switch this camera over. Let's see if I can do this without shaking too bad. Everybody hold on tight. Here we go. I'm going to swap this over and we'll come back in a minute. All right. I wanted to share with y'all Tech Talk 155. And guess what 156 is? Two things. Next week, Tuesday, is 156. And next week will be 3 full years. Will be the anniversary of Tech Talk Tuesday. And thank you all for that so much. Here's Blue 50. We're still working on the engine and the cylinder heads. We got the cylinders done over here, which I've showed you before. And here's the crankshaft. And here's the pistons. And I showed y'all that archaic spring tester I had on there the other day. I got 2 of these billet ones. These are pretty nice because they're all digital and they got a digital caliper on there too, which helps me measure all that stuff. And then here's a 44-year-old CBX. I know us Harley guys are not Honda fans, but this is a very unique 6-cylinder inline. I've showed you that before. And then some of our old stuff. Here's a really cool old toolbox that I got from Snap-on and Angel got, and it's a collector box. It's all around. I'm proud of, and I know her. She raced for us for 8 years, and she's still doing really well on the Vance and Hines team. But it had Star Racing on here, and it was a pretty cool little deal they had on the front here, all the way over. And I know this is not a toolbox advertisement, but I'm gonna share this for a minute. Look at this down here. That's a neat toolbox. I'm proud of that. And check this one out. Late great John Myers. John Jugaduga did this painting for us back when we won some championships. 1996 Winston Champions. There's Julie when she first started going to the races. And this me on Backzilla. This was a very fun bike to ride. I just posted some stuff on Instagram about it. This Michael Ray when he won with us a couple times, and Angel and John. Anyway, it's some old history. Look at this. How about Fred Collis? He put on here, he said, some people dream of working, of worthy accomplishments while others stay awake and do them. I thought that was very nice of him. Thank you. And there's some sevenths. When I ran my first Pro Stock 7-second run, I got in the 7-second club back in '83. And there's all kind of cool stuff on here. But yeah, how about when you're the Pro Rider of the Year in 1984 with NMRA and the National Hot Rod Association? That's some crazy stuff. And then I haven't unwrapped these yet so you can see how cool they are. But these are the stainless pipes, 6x6 that I got for the CBX. I'll show you more of that stuff later, and that goes on this 6-cylinder. All right, going out of the project room into the next warmer area. Here's the 72 El Camino. Here's the parts off of Blue 50 that I'm using, some of the parts. One side of the bike said it was a 114, and the other side said it was a 107, so I measured it up, and it is definitely a 107. Excuse me, it is a 114. And then here is the cam testing machine that we have. This motorcycle has had 3 or 4 different cams in it, but this is one with the 30-30 cam and a Borzilla a D&D pipe. So I'll let you see what it sounds like. Here's an experimental device. This is a red eye. And the cat has red eyes. How cool is that? And it's got giant wheels and giant brakes, and it really stops well. Here's the old Star Racing sign. I'm sorry it's upside down. I'll do better with that next time. We had that since 1979. The Star Cycling Machine. And in my grinding station over here, and you can see every window is, we've got some of our Wallies in there from the races, NHRA national events we've won over the years. And I didn't never really share this. You know, it's like bragging on yourself a little bit, but look, I just want to tell you, this is a lot of people involved. This is 4 decades of championship performance we had when I was riding and along the way, and then John and Angel, and John there, and then Angel was racing for us, and Chip Ellis, and there's Chris raced for us, our team, and then that's Big Red, the real first Big Red. So that was a really nice little piece he made. And then here's some of the championship trophies that we put together over the decades. Had 3 with Angel racing for us. And we had 3 with John Myers, the late great John Myers, racing for us. It's a very cool trophy here. And I can tell you about these 82 national events we won and these trophies. I can just tell you this. That was not easy.
That was easy.
No, it wasn't. And there's a cool little piece that we got a long time ago to display. On the twin cams, this is really hard to turn with the tensioners, the cam chain tensioners, and here's the gear drive for twin cam S&S cells, and this is just free power. And I posted this piston one day, and I was showing somebody the screws that came loose from the throttle blade, and they said that I had the intake valve hiding the intake pocket, but I didn't. I just had it sitting there. And people say, well, what do you do to your pistons to make it flow better? If you'll look at this one, we got rid of the valve pockets by opening the intake valve later and closing the exhaust valve sooner. And we were able to get the pockets so shallow we didn't have that trouble. And this still would be very relevant in the NHRA Pro Stock today. You can see our spark plug notches, and look at the localized temperature burn we had right in the middle. And this is a giant piston. This is a 5.1 bore. It's a really big piston. And this is a 2.8 intake valve. Let's go down the line, show you a few more things. It's one of the first twin cam engines that we came up with S&S. It was the 126. It was the first big bore short stroke combo. And then here's some old stuff. Here's a old wheelie bar panel off of John Meyer's bike when he was #1, and this is a body off of the Suzuki that John raced his first year and I won races with. This is the only body in the existence of a bike that John Myers and I rode in the same. John was I was ending my career as a driver, and John was beginning his career as a driver. And then here's some checks. It's a stack of cash checks we already have here. And then a few more little heads and cylinders that we have saved up. And then back when scrapbooks were cool, we had a scrapbook for every year. And if you're a big fan, man, you would love to see some of that stuff. And then some more trophies and winter circle hats. Y'all, you just can't know how blessed I am. And I know that. I'm not bragging as much as I'm just thankful, because this was involving a lot of people and we needed them to do well. There's Jackie and me with our second funny bike. There's Angel on the cover of the magazine. That was pretty cool. And then here's my Suzuki powered dragster that went in the 7s, man, about 30 years ago. That was very cool. And there's John and Angel racing each other. Angel's second race, and John in, I think this is 97 maybe. But anyway, I'm going to go back to the design room and talk to you about what we intended to talk about today. All right, the air conditioner's on in here, so I know that helps. It helps me. It doesn't help you, but it helps me. All right, I'm going to move this back up and set it up to where we can talk about a subject at hand. That's the tour of the updates for the man cave. Alrighty, let's flip it back over. All right, now. Hope y'all can see this. I'm going to show you, this is a screenshot from our weather station data from Denver, 7/19/14. What does that make it? 8 years ago. This is when we ran in Denver 8 years ago. The time of day, the barometer, the temperature, relative humidity, the adjusted altitude. Oh, what does that say? AH, I forgot right off the top of my head. The grains of water in the air, vapor pressure, which is very cool. The dew point, the ADR, that would be DA, 9,000 feet. That's the pressure altitude, or the static altitude, I believe. And then this is, the wind was 180 degrees, like a headwind. But this page is a countdown that went every 5 minutes for us. Let's see, 240, 235, 230, 1225, 1220. So each 5 or 10 minutes, it would print out what the weather was. So we could do a trend every day. So if you'll look at the temperature, you can see that we went 89, 89, 90, 87, 88, 89, and then all the way kept changing the altitude and the weather. But what I wanted to tell you about is this density altitude is 9,000 feet, even though the static altitude is 5,600. This is a Mile High, Bandimere Mile High Raceway on the mountain in Denver, and it's only 5,600 feet off the ground, off sea level. But with the temperature, the pressure, and the water, it was over 9,100 feet here. And I'm gonna tell you about 9,100 feet. If you do the math, that's about 20%, horse performance loss. I wrote down in order. I don't know if you can see this good enough for me to hold this up here, but you can see it wasn't very wet. 16% relative humidity here, 16%, and the grains of water was only 45 grains. We race in the summertime here and all over, like Indianapolis, Ohio, Virginia, you know where all the guys go, Topeka, Kansas, where they race NHRA, and they will be over 100 grains of water in the air. Now, it's somewhat related to the relative humidity, but it's also connected to the vapor pressure. We've seen vapor pressure up 700, 600, 800 vapor pressure, which means a ton of water is in the air. So I wrote down a couple things to help us understand. I wrote down pressure, temperature, and humidity. I'm gonna let this down a little bit so it doesn't have to be so microscopic looking. The pressure is what makes the air go in the engine, y'all. When the barometer at Gainesville for the Gator Nationals is 30.10 or 30.2, that is the barometer, and that's how much pressure the good Lord has given us in the atmosphere to push air in the engine. Like a supercharger, like a turbocharger, like nitrous, it pushes air in the engine. So when you're running your race car or your motorcycle at Gainesville, you will notice that you go faster there than you do at Denver. These are the two wide ranges of altitude. Gainesville this year, the Pro Stock cars were going in the 640s, and at Denver they were going 690s, and it's about 20% less power at Denver than it was at Gainesville. Matter of fact, it was 1,000 foot below sea level at Gainesville, and it was 9,000 feet above sea level corrected altitude at Denver. And you say to me, well, George, Gainesville Raceway, I looked it up on the internet, it's only 500 feet above sea level. That's static. That's like a static compression ratio. It is 500 feet above sea level. Might be 400 wherever you check. But understand, y'all, that the altitude, static altitude, is just a number. When you go to Denver, it's only 5,500 feet static altitude. So what's that? That's only 5,000 feet different. But look, when you go there and the barometer is 2310 or 240 or 24.1, if you go there and look at the Weather Channel, it says corrected barometer is 2990. Yeah, well, that's not what the engine sees. The engine sees only the pressure that's the ambient pressure at the facility. So when your engine's going down the racetrack, I don't care if you're a car, motorcycle, whatever you are, the pressure, when the pressure on the back of the intake valve, piston goes down. When the piston goes down, the intake valve opens. And when the intake valve opens, the pressure outside shoves the air in the engine. If the pressure outside is 2990, a lot of air is going in your engine. And when the pressure is only 2430, that's a lot. That's 10,000 feet different barometer pressure. So that means if you do the math, I think if you divide those two pressures, like 30 and 24, you'll get something like 20%. I haven't done that exactly, but at 20% less air going in your engine, that means if you're going to have the correct air-fuel ratio, like we always talk about with wide bands or reading spark plugs or whatever, we have to have somewhere near 13:1 with gasoline. Might be 12:5, might be 13:5, but it's somewhere in between. And I use 13:0:1 air-fuel ratio. That means 13 parts air and 1 part fuel. Now, if you have 20% less air pressure pushing air in your engine, barometer pushing air in your engine, you're going to need 20% less fuel. So if you have a fuel-injected machine, you're going to have to make sure that the onboard barometer corrects for you, or you're going to have to make the correction yourself. When we ran there in 2016 and prior to on fuel injection, I just took the correction factor from our normal 1.04, 1.05 correction and put in 1.2, 1.25 correction for the fuel, and it changed it the right amount, and we moved it up or down to get 13:1. Now, you guys with closed loop, where your engine has wide bands on it and it measures the air-fuel ratio in the pipe, it can change your ECM and your ECU to where it will adjust accordingly, where you have the correct air-fuel ratio. And that's how that works. Now, back to the jets. Steve Johnson, I believe, was the only one at Denver that had carburetors on, and he had to lean out his carburetors over 20% in order for him to run in the teens. I think he finally ran a 717, and low of the weekend was a 709, but somewhere around 715 or 714 was a really good number for an inline Suzuki, especially since at that day, last Sunday, 2 days ago, they had to weigh 30 pounds more than they had to weigh at Denver last year. And the Buells, the V-twins, weighed less than they did at Denver last year. So the difference between the four cylinders and the V-twins was big difference. I think it showed up as about 500ths between the quickest Buell and the quickest four cylinder. And a lot of that was because the Buell was lighter than it's ever been, and the Suzuki was heavier than it's ever been. NHRA changed the rules 4 times this year. And I just saw on the internet just 30 minutes before I started Tech Talk Tuesday today that they made another adjustment. I think this will be the 5th one of 2022 where they're going to put 10 more pounds back on the V-twin and take 5 pounds off of the inline 4-valve 4-cylinder. So they're closing the gap back up again with about a 20, maybe a 10, no, 15%. Yeah, thank you, Donald, 21%. That's right. That's what we have to do to make the carburetors and the fuel injection work, because we're down also 21% horsepower. So if you have 100 horsepower at Gainesville and you go there, you're going to only have 80 horsepower. And you can double all that at 200 horsepower. Even the pro stock cars have 1,400 horsepower at Gainesville. At Gainesville, they might have had 1,440 at the track, ambient horsepower. And then at Denver, they were down, what's that, 20%. That's 14, 28, 280 horsepower down at Denver. So you have to make a lot of adjustments, and that's what I wanted to talk about real quick. Was we add ignition timing depending on the water grains and the vapor pressure. Water grains and vapor pressure. We don't change ignition timing based on altitude. If there's 100 grains of water in the air, you better put a degree of timing in it just so you can burn some of the water off to get your air-fuel ratio and your horsepower right. If you're down here in the 40s on grains of water, if you have a nitrous engine, you better be really careful moving your timing around, ignition timing around, because that's really dry. And a lot of guys burn up their nitrous cars or engines or motorcycles when they go from 100 grains down to 45 or 50. They forget or don't know that it just dried out a ton. And the ignition timing they were running might have been just right for wet air, but it is not just right for dry air. So please be careful with that. Also, the other thing that changes at 20%, think about this. Gearing on a pro stock car or a pro stock motorcycle, when you're geared to go, all you can go in first gear, just like almost blowing the tire off in low gear, and then going to the rev limiter in high gear at the finish line. When you're at sea level, you have to run a whole different rear gear, a whole different sprocket combination, and you have to launch at a much lower RPM in order to go fast at sea level. And when you get up to the mountain where Steve and the Pro Stock NHRA guys were this weekend, they had to put a ton of gear in it. What I mean by that is a ton numerically. They had to make up for how low a horsepower it was, and they ran 10 mile an hour less on the mountain because they had 20% less power, so they had to change the gearing a lot. And the guy that has the RPM right and the gearing right and the jetting right and the timing right and drives really good, usually the one that goes low and wins. And also I wanted to tell you all before I get off of this, the pressure is number one in how much difference it makes. Pressure, that dictates how much air goes in your engine. The temperature is next important. If it's really hot, you lose about 1% of horsepower every 10 degrees of ambient. And if it cools off 10 degrees, you gain about 1% in power. If you have 400 horsepower, what's that? 1% is what, 4 horse? 10% is 40 horse? Yeah, so 4 horsepower. I mean, if you're normally aspirated and you're doing all you can do, temperature makes a big difference. Third most important is the humidity. Some people argue with me about this, but in my 40 years experience, this right here made the biggest difference in power, how much pressure is going in. The temperature made the next, and then the humidity is next. It's either wet or dry or sort of halfway. And if it's really dry, we run half a degree less timing. If it's really wet, we run 1 degree more timing, but we don't really move from our perfect dyno timing higher or lower more than 1 degree most of the time, every now and then 1.5 degrees at the finish line. Hey, Parker. Hey, Robert. I see some names on Parker knows what's up. They did really good there. I think, Parker, you guys went like 719 there, which is incredible. And hey, I guess you go to Sonoma, you get to put 10 pounds on. That ought to be fun, right? Okay, enough of that dig right there. David, good to see you guys' names on here. Last thing I want to talk to you about is the harmonic balancer on the engines we run, the car engines, ATI, fluid dampener, what's the other one? Global West. They make some really nice pieces to go on the end of the crankshaft for your V8s, V6s, whatever, 4 cylinders, whatever you run, harmonic balancers. And it handles the torsional vibration that your crankshaft in your engine is going like this when it's running. Yes, it's rotating at many, many RPM, but it's also vibrating, harmonically vibrating. So we put a harmonic balancer on there. Also, I want to tell you, if you find any words on my post here misspelled, you know, like harmonic or balancer or pressure, temperature, anything that's misspelled, you get an extra 5 points for calling me out on it, because I've been racing for a really, really long time, and I have an accent problem, and I have a vocabulary problem, and I also have a math problem, and I also don't know how to spell. But the good Lord blessed me with the ability to tell stories and share this information with you. Thank you for that. Okay, here's the harmonic balancer for the Harley. It's not a harmonic balancer, but it's a compensator. And it's made to compensate for the torsional vibration and the jerky, herky-jerky that the crankshaft does. So, as everything in our career, our 40 years of racing, 30 years of racing, anytime we had anything come up in our racing career or our parts that we needed or anything to improve our performance, we always relied on Liberty's gears to help us with heat treat, surface material finish, what designs to use. And everybody that has a Pro Stock car has a Liberty 5-speed. There's many really unbelievable Liberty's gears parts out there that are running all over the world, and Liberty's gears makes this billet part for us for the compensator replacement ramp cam. Now this ramp, this compensator, came off of a 9,000 mile police bike that's been very well maintained. And I want to show you that I want you to know that the tire and the clutch and the compensator are wearable items. People say, I think my compensator wore out, I got to put something else on there. But listen, this is the stock compensator. I want you to notice how much it wore, because it is metal on metal. And this thing runs in here like this when you're going down the road. And I know I've told you this many, many times, but I want you to know that Harley spent decades and millions of dollars coming up with this kit that controls that torsional vibration. And they made these parts really nice. They made this part really nice. But this part, they got so many people fussing at them over the last 20 years of these lobes wearing out, because it is a wearable item. They made this part harder. They increased the Rockwell C scale on a real high number. So this part is super hard, but it is very, very brittle. This is like glass. So when you start rough riding your Milwaukee 8, you're going to shatter this in pieces. It's going to break here and here and here, and it will tear up a lot of parts in here. So we sent a bone stock one that looked really nice like this to Craig Liberty at Liberty Gears, and had him digitize this and digitize the competition that also make these. And this is the result of the digitization and the optimization and the material improvement and the hardness improvement, where it's still a little bit wearable item, but this will not break. Listen, you guys, this thing is so tough. I mean, can you imagine if you raced Pro Stock cars and your gears kept breaking? You would call Liberty's Gears and have them work on the material, the heat treat, and the hardness, and how they made the gears. Well, we trust those guys with everything we need made out of tough metal. And this is a proprietary piece of material that is CNC machined and digitized to be the proper shape to take advantage of all the money and all the time that Harley spent perfecting this combination of pieces, but they made this part too brittle. So this is a very brittle part that will break in your Milwaukee 8. And if you buy this from us, this is a Technomercial. It'll go in here and it will eliminate breakage. That's all the time I have for today. I wanted to share you guys all that, and I wanted to tell you about it. And I also wanted to tell you thank you very much for following along. Tech Talk Tuesday number 155 is in the books. Everything that we do on these 155 Tech Talks are stored on our YouTube channel at Star Racing GA. Next week will be the anniversary, 3-year anniversary. And I'm very thankful for you guys tuning in and keeping up with us here at Star Racing. Jackie and I are very thankful, and it's good to see y'all, all these wonderful names on here. And may God bless y'all. Have a great week, and I will see you on the anniversary of Tech Talk Tuesday. Good night.